So at this point, we have done glycolysis. And that happens whether we have oxygen or not. Now, the next step in this process is going to be decided by the presence of oxygen. So we can go one of two ways. If we have oxygen, we are going to move on to the citric acid cycle, followed by oxidative phosphorylation. If, however, oxygen is not present, then we aren't going to be able to do the citric acid cycle. Instead, we would move on to fermentation. So right now, we're going to assume that we do indeed have oxygen, and we're going to follow this left arrow here. After we've made after we've done glycolysis, we're going to move on to the citric acid cycle. So here you can see this in general in relation to the organelles. So glycolysis again happened in the cytoplasm, and now we're going to enter the mitochondria. So because we have oxygen, we're able to enter the mitochondria. So what is going to enter the mitochondria is the two pyruvates that we made in glycolysis, right? Because glucose is already broken down into pyruvate. Each of those pyruvates is going to get oxidized into a different 2-carbon molecule called acetyl-CoA, and then acetyl-CoA is going to enter this cycle called the citric acid cycle. And in the citric acid cycle, we're going to generate some more ATP. We're going to make some energy storing molecules like NAD and FADH2. We're also going to completely break pyruvate down into carbon dioxide. So we're going to lose a carbon dioxide here, and then we'll lose 2 carbon dioxides here. Remember that pyruvate has 3 carbons. 1, 2, 3. By the time we have lost those 3 carbon dioxides, the carbons from the pyruvate are completely broken down. Remember, though, that we made 2 pyruvates in glycolysis. So the entire process of pyruvate oxidation and the citric acid cycle is going to happen 2 times per glucose molecule, because it does 1 citric acid cycle for each pyruvate. Because we made 2, this whole thing is going to happen twice for each 1 glucose. So here's the first step. This is just a quick transition reaction that has to be done before pyruvate can enter the citric acid cycle. So here's pyruvate. We've got 1, 2, 3 carbons. And in this process, we are going to remove one of those carbons in the form of CO2. So you can see down here that the resulting molecule is going to only have 1, 2 carbons. So this is the first carbon we've lost. This process is also going to create a little bit of energy storage. So we're going to create 1 NADH. Remember that there's 2 molecules of pyruvate per glucose. So this whole thing happens times 2. So what that means is glucose started out with 6 carbons. In the pyruvate oxidation, we are going to lose 1 CO2 for each pyruvate. So we're going to lose 2 carbons total. And we're only going to have 4 carbons that actually enter the citric acid cycle. Each pyruvate makes 1 molecule of acetyl-CoA, and each pyruvate makes 1 NADH. So for a total of 2 acetyl-CoA and 2 NADH molecules. So we didn't make any ATP in this pyruvate oxidation yet. However, we have made 2 energy storing molecules here, which we're going to find out later are going to be able to take that energy and contribute it to making ATP. And then this acetyl-CoA is going to go ahead into the actual citric acid cycle. So next we have the citric acid cycle. It can also be called the Krebs cycle. So if you're looking and studying in a different place, you might see the word Krebs cycle. These are the same exact thing. And it is going to complete the breakdown. So by the end of the Krebs cycle, pyruvate and acetyl-CoA will be completely gone, and we will have generated all 6 of the carbon dioxides that we make from glucose. So again, this is a cycle, so it happens in turns, cyclical turns. So each turn of the cycle is going to make 1 ATP, 3 NADH, and 1 FADH per turn. However, the whole cycle happens times 2. So per glucose, we're actually going to make 2 ATPs, 6 NADH, and 2 FADH2. So this is just straight up energy. We know what ATP does. And these are going to be storing energy for later so that when we get to the electron transport chain, we can pull ATPs out of that chemical stored energy. So here's a quick summary. So to begin, remember we had pyruvate, which we're going to turn into acetyl-CoA. When we do that, we make an NADH and a CO2. The acetyl-CoA is then going to enter the citric acid cycle. In the very beginning, it loses 2 carbon dioxides. It's going to generate 2 NADHs over here. Here's my 1 ATP, 1 FADH2, and then here's a third NADH. So all of this, the pyruvate oxidation and then the citric acid cycle, is going to happen times 2 for each glucose molecule that we start with in glycolysis. So I don't need you to memorize all of the specific steps. I know that the book does go into every single step. However, the molecules that I need you to know are that we start with pyruvate. We lose NADH and CO2 to make acetyl-CoA. We lose carbon dioxide and NADH. We make ATP, FADH, and here's that third NADH. So I want you to be able to track the reactants that go into these processes and the products that are produced as they occur.